Property Disclosures, the Real Estate Professional's Guide to Reducing Risk. Page 16, AIDS Disclosure. Stigmatized property may also include property in which the current or former occupant is infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, or diagnosed with acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS. AIDS is a fatal disease that affects the body's ability to fight infection. AIDS can be transmitted in several ways: sexual contact, inoculation with HIV-infected blood, during pregnancy from the infected mother to her child. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Surgeon General both stress that AIDS is not transmitted through casual daily contact. You cannot get the viruses from toilets, doorknobs, telephones, office machinery, and household furniture. This is significant for the real estate profession because subsequent occupants of property formerly occupied by persons with AIDS are not at risk of contracting the disease simply by occupying the property. Nevertheless, prospective purchasers may express concern about possible health risks associated with such a property. These fears are unfounded. Fair housing concerns. The 1988 Fair Housing Act amendments established a new protected class, the handicapped, which includes people diagnosed with AIDS. It is now illegal to discriminate against people with handicaps, just as it is illegal to discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, or familial status. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, it is illegal for real estate agents to make unsolicited disclosures that a current or former occupant of the property has AIDS. If a prospective purchaser directly asks an agent if a current or former occupant has AIDS, and the agent knows this is in fact true, HUD advises that the agent should not respond. Real estate agents who respond to this question by providing information regarding the AIDS status of a current or former occupant run the risk of violating the fair housing laws. The best response is to tell purchasers to pursue the investigation on their own if they have determined this information to be relevant to their decision to purchase the property. Disclosing other stigmas. Although federal law provides guidelines for handling AIDS disclosures, there are still gray areas surrounding disclosures of other stigmas. When a property defect is physical, disclosure is mandatory in most states. When the defect is of an emotional nature, however, disclosure becomes dependent on materiality. The following guidelines will help determine whether or not a stigma is material to a particular real estate transaction. Step number 1. Determine whether the information is fact or fiction. Separate rumor from reality. This can be accomplished by checking police reports and newspaper accounts, as well as by interviewing neighbors. If the stigma is based on rumor and not on fact, there is no obligation to disclose. If, on the other hand, the stigma turns out to be factual, for instance, there really was a murder, you should proceed to the next step. Page 17. Step number 2, check state laws. Many states have enacted laws that generally apply to AIDS, homicides, or suicides, and provide that the stigma is not a material factor that needs to be disclosed. If a state does not have a specific law governing disclosure of stigmas, there may be other laws, such as privacy laws, that influence or affect disclosure decisions. State statutes vary widely. However, so it is essential that an agent be familiar with state laws. If there is a law governing disclosure, it will probably state that there is no duty to disclose. Because there is no disclosure obligation, investigation into the issue ends here. If there is no law governing disclosure, proceed to step number 3. Step number 3, determine materiality. A stigma would be considered material if the knowledge of the stigma would influence a reasonable person's decision to purchase the property, or the amount of money he or she would be willing to pay for the property. Most stigmatized property cases involve stigmas that are less sensational than, say, a multiple murder. Less sensational stigmas may or may not impact on the market value of the property. Nevertheless, it is important to determine what a reasonable person would do with the stigmatizing information, as it is impossible to know whether the fact would be material to each and every buyer. It may be a good policy to disclose all facts. It would be better to have a potential buyer walk away from the transaction than to have a lawsuit filed against the seller, agent, or both. If at this point in the analysis you have concluded that the stigma is a material fact, the stigma must be disclosed. Step number 4, discuss disclosure with the sellers. Inform the sellers about what you have determined regarding the stigma. Explain why this particular factor may make a difference in the sale of their property. If the sellers agree to disclose the stigma, make the disclosure judiciously. It is not necessary to disclose information about a stigma to those who simply express interest in the property. The best time to disclose is at the contract proposal stage. Approach the subject by disclosing one more relevant piece of information about the property, using simple, non-threatening language. If the sellers disagree and refuse to disclose what you have determined to be a material fact regarding the property, you will find yourself in quite a dilemma. It would be appropriate to inform the sellers that they are increasing their chances that the buyer will file a lawsuit, claiming the stigma was truly a material fact to them. Because the sellers are your clients, you may not disclose information that they have specifically requested not be disclosed without violating the fiduciary duties of loyalty, and confidentiality. However, by not disclosing the stigma, you may also be in violation of the basic duty to disclose material facts that affect the value or desirability of the property. The best way to handle this dilemma may be to give up the listing. Conclusion: it is important to understand that property stigmas are emotional issues that need to be handled carefully. To reduce the legal risks in this area, it is essential that real estate agents understand the issues associated with stigmatized property, know pertinent federal and state laws, know how to evaluate facts, and make informed decisions about disclosure.